It's time to take your seat in the front row with Mike Vaccaro. Here's your host, Mike Vaccaro.
Hey, thank you, Chuck, and welcome everybody. Mike Vaccaro here with you once again. Behind the scenes, as always, JR Quitman, our creator, producer, and director. Our thanks for everybody who has watched, who has subscribed, who has listened to an episode as we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. We did that with episode 42 featuring future Pro Football Hall of Famer Dwight Freeney. And again, thank you all for making this possible. And now, as we get set for year number 2, we have episode 43. And for that, we go to a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Currently, it is Larry Csonka. Larry Csonka, a great running back at Syracuse alongside Floyd Little and Tom Coughlin in the backfield for the Orangemen. Drafted by the Dolphins and on that 1972 undefeated team playing for Don Shula. He tells us stories about the coaches, his Hall of Fame players. Also great stories of befriending Elvis Presley. Yes, Elvis and Larry Csonka friends. We hear that story as well. All that is part of his new memoir, Head On, a memoir out soon from Larry Csonka. Once again, our guest, episode number 43, is a Pro Football Hall of Famer, Larry Csonka. Well, Larry, first of all, thanks so much for spending some time with us here today. And I know, part of it, you're kind of on your book tour, right? Head On, a memoir, which comes out October 4th. You happy that it's out now and the first chance you got a chance to see it? What was your reaction to seeing it?
It was a long time coming. Jim Kick and I were running mates back with the Dolphins in the 70s, and we did a book together about the 72 season while it was going on. Talk about hitting the nail on the head. When the undefeated season, we actually went game to game, and it was called Always on the Run. So I had some experience about that, but Dave Anderson was a local sports writer, or it was a pretty well-known sports writer at the time in the nation. And he was our chief consultant and writer and jack of all trades, and he kept up with us week to week, and it was a pretty good book. But it was kind of a pastime thing. Talking about a memoir and covering your whole life at 75, Audrey started to bug me a little bit and say, "Hey, we need to do this." So I said, "Okay, let's do it. But you've got to do the legwork, because I'm not going to talk to all these people and talk to all the people about how to write it, where to write it, when to write it." And she handled all the details. And I just literally started speaking to a couple of different people until we finally found someone that I thought was right. And then we bounced it back and forth, and I started reiterating the stories. And that poor guy, several of them had to listen on in. I had what I thought was a very interesting childhood, and the way I grew up was kind of unique. I grew up in the Midwest out in Ohio, and was the way I was situated in the family. I had 3 much older siblings and 2 much younger siblings. So Dad, right after the war, came back, and he was over in the Japanese theater. And when he got back, he qualified for a loan. So he moved out of Akron, where my older siblings had grown up and knew about school buses and flush toilets and all those things. We moved out instead. My father had grown up in a farm in Western Pennsylvania, and he longed to get back to the country. So he went out to Stowe, Ohio, and bought a 20-acre dirt farm in between 2 huge dairy farms, several hundred acres apiece. And I grew up kind of in a remote location outside of a small town called Stowe, and dealt with the animals a lot in nature, and had hundreds of acres on each side of me. I was free to roam the dairy farms at will, and it was a great way to grow up. I had 17 dogs when I was a kid, 15 to 17 dogs. So I literally was part of the dog pack for a long time.
How did that upbringing maybe help you and maybe toughen you for the football player and the person that you would become later in life? Well,
frankly, when you're in the woods and you're with critters a lot, the law of the land is the law of the land. The biggest lion eats first. And I kind of grew up that way. I wasn't around people other than my family until I was probably 9 or 10 years old. So I was a little bit socially behind. Didn't know how to really react with people. Just wasn't socially interactive much with people at all outside of just family. And I think that had a kind of a hard effect. I'm kind of on my own quite a bit. But I loved animals and I loved being at the farm and I loved being out where we were at. But I think it did slow me down a little bit socially when I got to school.
When did football emerge as something that you would eventually gravitate toward?
I went out for football in 7th grade, like most of us do. Of course, now kids have Pee Wee football. That didn't exist when I was a kid. And didn't know anything about it. And just lined up because I was kind of a big farm kid. They said, hey, we need you on the team. You know, the coach did, and put me on there. And I didn't know anything about where to line up or who. I didn't even know how to put the uniform on. They had to show me how to put the pads on. I put the thigh pads in upside down. I didn't know what I was doing. And the other kids were the older kids that I was trying to join their team. I was in 7th grade. I was playing with the 8th grade team. And 7th grade team didn't have a team because they couldn't afford it. But they had the 8th grade. So I went out for that. And I went out and held a dummy while the other guys were, I was late in the season when the coach had asked me to come out. So they had already gone through their practices and everything and knew what they were doing. And I was literally holding a dummy, just getting knocked down, being, the opposing team that they were going to practice against. And I got tired of it in about 2 weeks. Hell, I said I can get knocked down by a Holstein at home. I don't need to do this on the football field. So I quit. And then in a couple of weeks, I got in some trouble. We borrowed some bicycles and didn't return them and left them. We rode back from Akron after going to a theater and picked up some bicycles and rode back to Stowe and just dropped them off in front of the hardware. The guy in the hardware saw us, turned us into the police. Long story short, I was in trouble, stealing a bicycle. Actually, I figured I borrowed it, but nevertheless, you take it without permission, that's stealing. So I ended up in front of a juvenile court judge, and that judge referred me, was good friends with a fellow, it was our junior high principal at the time, a fellow named Mr. Saldus. And he stepped forward with the judge and said that he would decide what would go with me. And so the judge just referred me to his, whatever he did, whatever Mr. Saldus decided what I had, that was a sentence I had to serve. And as soon as I met Mr. Saldus, I walked up to him and he said, have you heard of football? I said, he's an ex-coach, now refereeing part-time. He's in his 50s. And I said, well, yes, sir, I've heard of it. He said, had gone out? I said, yes, I went out. He said, well, what happened? I said, I quit. He said, why did you quit? I said, well, I was just getting knocked down all the time. And he said, do you know anything about football? I said, no, sir. He said, that was your problem. He said, you come to he said, every day in 8th period, he said, what do you have 8th period? I said, study hall. About half my classes were study hall. Anyway, I was not a leading, another story. Anyway, I had to go to his office there in the junior high every afternoon at 8th period. And he gave me a couple of football books to read, and then I had to do book reports on them. And then he gave me tests and quizzes about what were in those football strategy books. And I literally learned every position, how to line up. I learned the intricacies of football and started to understand it. Then he promoted me to go back out again and for the sport. And I did. And what a world of difference. Let me tell you something. I talked about it in the book. What a difference that guy made in my life, because I would not have, not of my own accord would I have turned again to football. I would have probably, if someone recruited me, it would be a little different, but I still had no working knowledge. But the knowledge he gave me or instigated me in learning, coached me in learning, was what a great thing. See, if you don't happen when you go out for Pee Wee or you go out for junior high, whatever it is, if you don't have a coach that really teaches you the basics so that you understand what's going on, and you're just participating, running around, hitting people, that's not football at all. When you understand there's a sequence, there's timing, the intricacies, how it works, the running game, the power running game, the distance running game, the outside running game, the downfield, the passing game. When you understand all those things and who lines up to protect you in what circumstance, when you got a working knowledge of that, the game changes. And that's what the great thing about Pee Wee and some of the young, if you have coaches that really teach the basics, how to line up, how to get in a stance, the very basic things, how to put your shoes on correctly, how to put your thigh pads on correctly. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you just assume that kids will know, but they don't. And when you're going with a group of them, those kind of basics early on lend to, they make you feel confident is what it does. When you walk on the field, you feel confidence. When you walk on a football field and you're confident that you know what's going on and what you're about to face and what to expect, it's a whole different situation. I assume it's the same in basketball. I assume it's the same in baseball. I don't know. I presume it is.
Well, that education that you got because you got in trouble certainly led you a long way. You had a great year, great high school career at Stowe High School there. You started as a linebacker or defensive end, right? And then you switched to tailback. So at what point, you had that success and started to get some recruitment from the college scouts?
Oh, I think the college scouts, I was a big farm kid and light contact at that time. I was 15 years. And when I was 15 years old, I weighed 204. I was 15. So I was a big kid and was reasonable. I was not fast. I never was fast, but I was quick. And quick's a big thing in football, much more than fast, but back then particularly. So, I went out and played at defensive tackle and defensive end and played a little linebacker and was doing quite well. Then my sophomore year in high school, we had a coach named Fortner that came down from the Cleveland area, or Randolph area, and coached our team. And he was a little bit reminiscent of Ben Schwartzwalder, Don Shula. He was a basics guy, line up, understand what's happening, strategy man. And he was playing me at defensive end and linebacker, but I was aspiring to try to get in to carry the ball. I wanted to carry the ball. I liked the feeling of carrying the ball in the lower grades and when I had an opportunity to do it. And he had me on the return kickoff team, the short kickoff return. And we played a team my sophomore year right at the end of the season, and it was down to the wire on the thing, and they kicked off. I got the ball, it bounced into my hands, and I ran and knocked 2 or 3 people down, and he saw that. And so the next year he lined me up at fullback, and that's how it happened. Because
all on the kickoff. Special teams led to a great career once again. So again, you get recruited. Syracuse is your place that you go to. And you mentioned Coach Ben Schwartzwalder, World War II hero. Had to be a tough guy. What was it like playing for him? Because obviously he had great success at Syracuse. The running game and some of the guys that he coached with Jim Brown and Ernie Davis, Jim Nance, you as well. What was he like as a coach?
Direct. Ben was right to the point. You could tell that he had a lot of responsibility in the Second World War. I heard stories. I can't reiterate them because I don't know if they're true or not. But he had quite a colorful history in the war. And when he attacked football pretty basically, you got to remember, it was right after the war, and he started to coach and got into the Syracuse area in the late 50s, early 60s. And as a result of that, was very much into the running game. Jim Brown, Ernie Davis, Floyd Little. Look at the people that the great running backs that he had. He had a theory. He said, when you throw the ball, 3 things can happen and 2 of them are bad. So he wanted to run the ball, and he did an offset line, an off-balance line, and was really into that and into the intricacies of being a ball control offense even back then. And as a result of that, after going down to visit Ohio State and having Woody Hayes tell me and the other guys from Ohio that we owed it to our state to go to Ohio State, being a farm boy that shoveled a lot of cow shit, I just didn't figure I owed anybody anything. So I didn't go to Ohio State. I went to Syracuse because of the size of the running backs and how much they ran and the great possibility. I made a deal with Ben Schwartzalder as a high school student when he recruited me. Yeah, I would go there and play for him, and I respected his decision. I'd play at whatever position he put me at, but I wanted him to give me a fair shot as a running back. And he said he would do that and stood up and we shook hands, and that was the deal. And when I got there my freshman year, back then the freshmen couldn't play with the varsity. You had to play other freshman teams. So during the course of one of those games, he saw the films of me running the ball and decided that he would put me in the backfield with Floyd Little, who was a prime candidate for the Heisman that year. And his last 2 years he played, he was in the running for the Heisman each time. And it was a real thrill. He put me in there kind of to block for Floyd. I understood that and was pleased with it. I was pleased with the fact that it was in the backfield. Blocking for Floyd was a pleasure. Floyd's a great guy. But he occasionally on 3rd and short, I'd get the ball. And when I did my best, and it turned out pretty good. So that's how it happened.
Yeah, school record, almost 3,000 yards good in your career, as you said, playing with the late Floyd Little, but also breaking records of some of those greats, Jim Brown and Ernie Davis as well. You know, when you're going through it, do you realize kind of the career that you're having at the time, or is it something that you look back at and now in your book you mentioned it?
It's fun to look back and think about the fellows I went through college with, particularly Floyd Little, name one, Tom Coughlin, Nick Kisher. There's a whole series of them that were Tom Coughlin, Nick Kisher were in my class, in my year, and wind up with me. And you don't realize that you're making lifetime relationships with guys when you're playing in college until you get out of college, you go on to the pros, wherever you do. But then you start thinking about those guys and you hear from them and you get together in alumni gatherings and things. It's a lot of fun. So the college experience was very good. It was kind of tough my freshman year because I hitchhiked back and forth from Syracuse to Ohio a lot and was traveling, hitchhiking, freezing to death in Buffalo a couple times, or near freezing to death in Buffalo. And but then I went home, married my childhood sweetheart, brought her back, and had a kind of I'd say a tense meeting with Coach Schwartzalder. He didn't. I got in a lot of trouble my freshman and sophomore year. I was not a good, like I say, the same thing from the farm. The social. I just wasn't I didn't see fraternity or sorority. Not to put those down. I think those are great things in their own right. I just didn't fit into that, and I was pretty obtuse to that, and I didn't have a lot of patience, and I got in some trouble in school with other students, and had to go before the dean. I was on triple something or other. I was in probation. I don't know what it was, but I was this close to getting thrown out of school. If I got any further trouble with any of the students, I was going to get thrown out of school. When I went home, married my childhood sweetheart, brought her back, and we started to live off campus. And I just participated in football and classes and worked a job on the side. And that suited me a lot better. I started to fit in socially because of just a few other married students were there. But Ben Schwartzalder absolutely did not want me to get married, come back with my wife. And when I said, I'm going to do that irregardless, he said, okay. And he said, we'll do what we can, but we can't do much. But he did find me a good job that I could work at. And as a result, I started getting along beautifully because I wasn't eating at the dorm or living in a dorm or all of that stuff. I wasn't on fraternity row at all or any of that party stuff. And as a result, things went along smoothly. Well, a couple of the other guys, Tom Coughlin, went home and married his child, brought her back. And same thing with him. He started to have a much better, all of a sudden, Ben Schwartzalder changed his whole perception of having married guys on the team. It seemed like it lowered all the problems he was having. The social misfit thing all went away because we didn't have time to get in any problems. So that was an adjustment. But then, I liked my time at Syracuse. It was, very rewarding, I think is the words I would use. It was a learning experience and a very rewarding experience. Floyd Little, Jim Nance, there was a lot of players that I played with that went on to pro careers, and I knew for years and years.
Yeah, 44 is a famous number up there, but your 39 is retired at Syracuse as well for your contributions and again what you did there from 65 to 67 as a running back. So your career is great there. Then you get drafted in the first round, 8th overall by the Dolphins. What's going through your mind at that time? You know, getting a chance to go to the next level, go to pro football. What's going through your mind when you hear that you get drafted by the Dolphins?
Well, first off, I didn't know that Miami had a football team. It was an expansion franchise, probably it's 2 years old. And I did not, I was kind of hoping, Green Bay, Cleveland, somewhere where there was a big back already, or that historically it had a big running back that I would be included in that kind of situation. Miami was pretty much the bottom of the league, and we stayed there. In my rookie year, 68, 69, we continued to be at the bottom of the barrel. And then in 70, Don Shula, after going through his experience with Super Bowl with Joe Namath, ended up on the market. And I guess that's when he locked into Miami, and that's when I met him and thought that I'd probably be traded. And I went in his office and he said, you can come in my office and shut the door. You can say anything you want. He said, in front of the team, you address me as coach. And, he had very disciplined rules on how to interact. And I thought, I'm probably not going to fit in here. So I was thinking maybe he'll trade me to Cleveland or he'll trade me to the Rams. I was looking at several different places. So I went in to see him. And he had a lot of rules and did a lot of barking at practice. And I didn't think that I was going to fit in it with him at all. And I went in to see him and he said, what do you think? I said, I don't like you. And he said, I'm glad you said that, because he said, I don't really like you either. I said, well, if you're going to trade me, can I have any kind of say so? He said, I already tried to trade you. He said, I can't get anything for you. He said, well, he didn't say that. He said, I can't get enough for you. Whatever his definition of enough. I quizzed him later. He always laughed about it. He never did tell me the real story, but he did kid around about that. But it was funny because when he said, you can say anything in here, I said, good, I don't like you. And he came right back with the same, bounced it right back. That's how we started. But the importance of that is it's total honesty. I mean, you don't have, trying to say, well, I think I can fit in here. I can fit in there. I didn't think I fit in anywhere in his plans. He's very much a passing, he was a defensive back when he played. He's very into the pass. Johnny Unitas, all you got to say, look at historically what happened there at Baltimore. And I thought, well, he's never going to be interested in a power running game or, a ground game. But he hired a coach named Monty Clark from Cleveland, who was a great offensive tackle for Jimmy Brown at the Browns, and was one of the captains of the offensive line or offensive unit. And he was a very smart guy. And he came down, and we had at the time, I think Larry Little was there, and then Monty Clark instigated Bob Kuchenberg coming to us, and Jim Langer, who was a Hall of Famer later. There was probably 5 offensive linemen that Monty Clark instigated being brought into the Miami picture that really turned into being a great offensive line. When I say great in the sense of communication. They weren't all pros, 2 or 3 of them were, which is great, but they were all intelligent men that could communicate with each other. In the power running game, believe it or not, it looks like it's all brute force. It's not. It's very coordinated. It's very timing. It's very dependent on timing and knowing what each other are going to do, because you're talking about milliseconds here. You're talking about quarter, half second makes all the difference. You can't collide with your offensive linemen when they're trying to X block or they're trying to trap. You've got to understand their calls at the line of scrimmage. They're calling and changing how they're going to block the play that was called in the huddle. They're going to change how they're going to block it by calls, red, blue, green, orange, whatever it is. But you've got to hear that, and you've got to know what that means, and because there's going to be a tiny little gap in between a whole lot of brawn. And if you hit that gap, your chances are you're going to blow through it, because it's the space in between all that momentum. And you'll be one-on-one with a defensive back. And of course, a 240-pound fullback can really shine when you're running into a 180-pound safety. But if you hit into your lineman or hit them in the back or injure them or collide with them, it destroys that. So there's a lot of understanding, a lot of procedure and practice and communication that goes into that. And to have someone like Monty Clark as an assistant coach to lay that out was just spectacular. And he did, and it worked. And then we did. And ball control offense is what we were about. In 3rd and 2, you better look out, because we had all different kinds of ways to do it. And with a simple red call or blue call, everything would change, but we'd know. And our productivity rate on 3rd and short, 2nd short, 3rd and short, 3rd and short predominantly was, my gosh, it was up in the 80 and 90 percentile. When you have that, you cause that defense to have to pull in to try to stop that. The minute they pull in, when you've got wideouts named Briscoe or Warfield, they're one-on-one out there. If those other guys pull in, if that safety steps up, if the sandbacker cheats in, all that reflects on the passing game and the defense. They get one-on-one. How would you like to be out there and hear your safety call it? He can't help you. You're the defensive halfback, and you're looking over at Paul Warfield, who, smokes people on a regular basis. And you got him one-on-one, and you're thinking, boy, I hope they'd give it to that fullback, because I'm never going to be able to stay with Warfield, And that's the kind of feeling I'm sure fellows defensive halfbacks had out there when those situations happen. And we would be consistent. We would 3rd and short, we would get the 2 yards, or we would get the 1.5 yards, or we'd get the 3 yard. And then when the defense finally started drawing in to stop it, then we'd fake it and go to one-on-one on Warfield. And that was when you have that kind of tit for tat situation. Boy, it puts the defense in a real helter-skelter situation on what to do. And when you have ball control offense like that, where you can just walk down the field with it and burn the clock. Today, there's not much ball control. It's all line up. If you're down 23-0 or 21-0 at halftime, used to be, well, you figure the game's pretty much over, because there's just ball control after that. Well, today, you'd be down 28-0 and make a comeback and win the second half, because it's all up and down the field so fast. That's not good or bad. It's just different.
Yeah.
If you're a fan, you got to think about it. Like when you sit in the stands, a lot about football. You've been sports minded, but there's a lot of folks that don't. And when they sit in the stands and they're looking, they see a guy throw a ball and a guy run down the field and catch it. They can appreciate that, because it's self-explanatory. But when you see a big mass of humanity and it's 3rd and 2 and there's tremendous collisions and a lot of things happen and they get it, you don't really know what happened. You don't understand that, because you were never bore witness to that. You were never involved in that as a kid or in high school. You never saw the development of a professional power running game. So it's unappreciative. But from a fan's point of view, when you see that ball in the air, it's much more exciting. So you can't argue with the fact that it's more exciting, more fun to watch today. But there's that old ball control thing when you were playing for the team and each other, and weren't just catering to the fans. It was a little different. I think a lot of people don't understand what they're seeing on a ball control offense. So I'm sympathetic with them, but it is fun when you see the long bomb and you see someone streaking down the field and he's got it. It's a great time.
Well, it was a great time for you guys, though, as well. As you said, that balance that you did have. So 3rd and 2, you probably knew you were going to get the ball a lot of times. 6'3", 235, maybe 250 at times in your playing career. Is that the time that you really relished knowing that you had a chance to not just do something good, but dole out some punishment and go through people instead of trying to go around them all the time?
Well, when you talk about going through people, there's guys like Butkus and Nitschke and Willie Lanier. You didn't go through them. If you were lucky enough to have someone dragging on them, causing them some major concern so they couldn't fully face off with you, then you might get an edge, see? But if they sprung you through there, if there was a quick action blocking situation and you pop through the hole, and you're looking at Krause or Kasulki from Minnesota, defensive backs that weighed 180 pounds. Well, that's, what you just alluded to. I was 240, 250, and I'm rolling with that momentum. Well, of course, you can make it look, very one-sided when you got a 180-pound guy trying to come up and tackle you. He's going to get a lot of punishment. And that, that makes you look like a superior runner. But the fact of the matter is, it's your line that gets you through the Nitschkes and the Laniers and the different people. Bubba Smith, Alan Page, Joe Green. You didn't run over Joe Green. You didn't run over Ray Nitschke. You tried to get a good block on them and slide off them if you could and get 3 yards. That was what you were after. But if you do that consistently, that's, if you have that consistency and you can do that day in, play out all through the game, you're going to control the ball and chances are win. And that's how we went undefeated in 72.
Yeah, you won a lot of games. 72, obviously the perfect season. Let's go back to 71 season, though, because you go to the Super Bowl, you come up short. Did that kind of set the tone and set things up for what 1972 would be?
Mike, absolutely. I think you read that in the book. It talks about there's no worse feeling in all of professional football than losing the Super Bowl. And not just losing it, just getting hammered in it. And that's what happened. Dallas just hammered us. And Bob Lilly, I didn't think people could pick me up by my head, but Bob Lilly proved it could happen. He's a great player. And they did a great job in that Super Bowl, and it just, dropped us right into the depths of despair after being so excited and doing so well, and then getting to the Super Bowl, and then just getting hammered in it. And Coach Shula used that. He had been through that, back when they lost with Baltimore with Namath. And I'll never forget, after the game, he said, "I want every one of you to remember how you feel right now." And when we first got together the next early fall, to start practicing for the next season for 72, he brought up that game. The first films we watched were the films of the Super Bowl. And he said, "I want you to remember how you feel after losing that, because we're going to draw on that." He said, "This year, our objective is to go one game at a time and treat every game as though it's the Super Bowl. So we get consistently approaching the game like it's the Super Bowl each week." Jim Kick looked over at me in that meeting when Coach Shula said that and winked and said, "Buckle up." I'll never forget. He was exactly right. Shula would not let us forget that. He brought it up week to week. And, he was, what he was after was perfection. He never talked about winning every game. He talked about approaching every game like it was the Super Bowl. And then lo and behold, because of that, I don't think it was the thrust of what he was talking about was to get back to the Super Bowl and win it. But he wasn't thinking that we were going to go and win every game. Who does that? No one's done that back then, the first 50 years of the NFL, no one had done it. And now it's been 50 years since, and we're still the only team that's done it. But it was because of the fact that we suffered that loss and we started out so serious each week. And it wasn't me or Jake Scott or Nick Bonacani, the stars of the defense, or other stars on the offense, Warfield or Greasy. It was the guys that, even the special teams guys, I talk about it in the book. We had a rookie named Charlie Babb. He made the difference in the Cleveland game. He blocked a punt, picked it up, and scored. excuse me, without his effort, we lose to Cleveland and we don't have an undefeated season. So here's a guy that's playing second team, is just getting in on special teams, makes the difference in the game. That's teamwork. That's what it's all about. To be that serious and so into the game each week, into the inner workings, the intricacies, if you will, every week without getting the worst thing you could do in a practice. Shula would go absolutely bonkers if he thought you were like going through the motions, like half-hearted. Oh, he just couldn't stand that. It'd make him tremble. He just would shake. He wanted us to be out there for the time we were out there. And he had everything divided into these little timed increments during practice. We would do this, then we would do this, then the defense comes down and we do this for them, but then they do this for us. Boom, 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 boom. You run some gassers, you run a lap or two, and you go in. And practices, we practice 3-4 times a day sometimes back then. But he would, that's when he first got there, we did that. But he, even in double sessions, he would make it quick and to the point. But he wanted everybody's attention. He wanted that concentration. He wanted you to think about it. If you were going through the motions on a practice field under Coach Shula, he caught you at that 2 or 3 times, you generally got traded.
Yeah, as you said, he was tough. You learned that from Ben Schwartzwalter, your high school coach before that as well. So, again, 17-0, undefeated season. I know you guys, those of you that are left, still kind of get together, celebrate when that last undefeated team loses in the current NFL season. Is that something you guys do and something you relish, because it was so hard, obviously, in NFL to get to the Super Bowl, to win it, but then to go 17-0 is just amazing.
Mike, it's an ongoing live participation that no one else has. When you retire from the NFL and you walk away, you get old and decrepit and you fall apart. But you think about how you were and you think about that. But when you're still involved, see, because of that undefeated season, we're still involved. We're still a team on the field. A ghost team, but we're still there. And the team that's trying to go undefeated, or looks like they may go undefeated, they're competing with the people that they're competing with on the field, but they're also competing with us from 72. Some of us are ghosts, some of us are soon to be. But we're back in action. We're back competing. Obviously not on the field, but in our brains, we're competing. We're thinking about it. And, you get very involved in the games. I'll never forget when Tyree caught that ball for the Giants on the side of his head and won that game. I jumped out of my chair and about took my head off in the fan in the rec room or the garage. We were watching the game because I was very much in that game, Sure, 60 some years old, but I was still in that game. And you feel like you're on the field. It's you're that excited about it and that into it. A lot of the guys had the champagne toast and stuff. They did that for the newspaper. It's more like a Miller Lite or Budweiser toast, but we call each other and think about it, because you see it's already the 4th game. I think Miami's still undefeated. I think maybe one other, and you start to watch. You start to sit up and say, well, who's that and why? Then you start looking into the team and you start to think, well, here's who will beat them. You start that all over again. It's like playing again a little bit in a secondary position each year.
I mean, it's a beautiful way to think about it. Like you said, you're always involved, even though you guys haven't played for a long time now. You're always involved with what's going on, and certainly it keeps you guys, glued to the TV sets, as you said, to see what's going to happen. It's interesting, as you said, that the Dolphins are one of those early on here. A lot of football to go. Again, so the perfect season, and then you guys follow that up, going back to the Super Bowl as well. And you had a great Super Bowl in that victory. You were the MVP in Super Bowl VIII. Was it hard? I mean, it's the 3rd Super Bowl in a row, the 2nd victory. Was it harder the 2nd time through? And were you guys continuing to chase perfection once again?
Mike, I'll be honest with you. it was game to game in 72. There were cliffhangers probably more than 50% of the time. We were probably around 70% of the time we were, nip and tuck to pull the game out. There weren't many gimmies. In 73, I think the team was stronger and more confident, even though we lost 2 games. But I think that 73 team was actually more dominant, the offense had better ball control. The defense was even smarter, made fewer mistakes. It's unfortunate that we dropped 2 games. I think we lost to, let's see. Oh, I'm going back. That's I can't remember. I think it was Oakland, the Oakland Raiders we lost to. Yeah, that broke the streak. It was out in Oakland. And that was the first game we lost after going undefeated the year before. We were at Oakland. And a great story about that is you talk about the integrity of Shula as a head coach, living what he preached. We all thought, well, he demands this and he demands that. But he wanted to win, and the only way he wanted to win was by the book. In other words, you don't cheat, and wouldn't consider it. Well, to say that, everyone hears people say that, and you think, yeah, okay, well, put a little extra in a ball or let a little out, or all the things that can happen. Definition of cheating. Well, when we went out to play Oakland, we had gone through the undefeated season and we're part of the way through the 73 season. And we go out to play the Oakland Raiders in their facility. And because there's work going on in the stadium, we have to utilize the same locker room the day before the game. So they practiced that morning. We flew in, got there that afternoon, and came straight to the stadium and practiced in the same locker room that they had used, because the other one was shut down for construction. And I go in and I find Art Tom's locker. Art Tom's the defensive tackle that played with me at Syracuse, great big fella. And I went and used his locker and was going to leave him a note about how much, I was going to goof around with him. Anyway, I'm looking for something to write on. And I reached down into the bottom of his locker, that I'm going to utilize. And there's the game plan. There's the Oakland Raiders defensive game plan, which tells them what to do in down and distance on our consistencies on offense. In other words, this is what they're going to do to counteract this that we're going to do. I don't know if you can realize the importance of having that, but if you know what the defense is going to be in accordance with your alignment prior to the time that you line up, of course, you line up looking like you're going to commit to that play that they're expecting, and then you run a complete discombobulated change-up. And, of course, you end up scoring with that because you'll go to the weak side because they're anticipating a dive in the 4-hole, and you run a corner with the flanker. So that's how important that was. So I see it. I realize what it is. And Monty Clark comes walking up, our offensive line coach, and says, "What's that?" I said, "I don't know, and I never saw it." I hand it to him, and I wink at him. I just hand it to him. Now, if he's got that up in, he's up there being the spotter, and he's saying, "Okay, it's 3rd and 3. They're going to expect this. We're going to line up that way, but this is what we're going to do." I knew, he knew, I knew, we both knew. Yeah. So he just walks off. We lose that game. It's not a factor. It's like it never happened. So I after the game, I'm in there and I'm pissed. We lost, And Monty was walking by. I said, "Monty," and he said, "What?" I said, What'd you do with the game? Why didn't you utilize?" He said, "I took it over to Coach Shula, and he said, tear it up, throw it away. Don't look at it." Now, it's one thing to preach that. It's one thing to say, we don't cheat. But when something falls in your lap that you didn't conspire, that you didn't try to alter situations to gain, I didn't steal it. I found it. Now, in my book, I thought that's a little different than changing the pressure in the ball or whatever. So I was pissed. But that demonstrates how Shula lived what he preached.
Yeah.
Up until that point, there was no proof in the pudding. I believed he did. I thought he did, but all of us, there's a certain. When I find somebody else's game report in the lot, it's pretty hard to turn that down. I'm like, look at that and think, if he is dumb enough to leave that there, we're going to utilize. But that's how you look at it, different. But Shula, he was when he was a young man, he thought about going into the priesthood. So he took things very serious. His dedication to detail, his attention to the finites. Before he played in Super Bowl VII, he flew out to LA Stadium a week before, the Sunday off before. They used to have an open date before they put the Pro Bowl there and all that. He flew out, sat in that stadium, and mapped where the sun was every half hour. Think about that. Detail oriented. And man, that concentrated, that devoted to winning, but still that ethical that he, when he saw that game, he knew what that was. Wouldn't touch it. Just told him, throw it away. Don't even look at it. We can't, that's not, if we can't win, then we shouldn't. And we didn't. That's the kick in the butt. We didn't. That's the first game we lost in 17 or 18 straight games, And there you are. Now, I probably take it in the chin a little bit, but if somebody leaves a game report, I'm going to look at it, But if Shula picked it up, he lives tighter, he goes by a tighter rope than I do. There it is.
Yeah, it says a lot about him and his integrity. As you said, you lost to Oakland and you lost to Baltimore Colts there in 1973 on your way to that second consecutive Super Bowl. Eventually, your time with Miami ended. You went to the World Football League. You were drafted by the Memphis Southmen, and you played there a little bit. What was that experience like and that transition going from the NFL to the World Football League?
Well, a guy named John Bassett owned a team in the World Football League, and he was from Toronto, Canada. And we went up and interviewed with him in Toronto, I think back in 74, 75, whenever it was, and ended up striking a deal. And it was, my goodness, a multiple of 5 of my salary. So it was a great deal, a lot of money. And we were going to play in Canada, in Toronto. And I grew up in Ohio, and as a kid, we used to be able to go once a year. Dad would take us for a week, and we would go to somewhere in Ontario, northern Ontario, and we would fish, catch bluegill and bass, different things. And I just loved it. I thought that was just a cat's ass. I really liked going up to Canada to fish. And of course, I had played college football. I got to Canada a little bit, but then came back and always aspired to go to Alaska. Wanted to get up on further north and further west in Canada. Just dreamt about it, but got so involved in football and couldn't do it. And then, bam, it falls in my lap. We go to the World Football League. We go to see John Bassett, Toronto. We're going to have homes in Toronto part of the year and be up there and be able to fish, and go up early and stay late, all those things. And it was just perfect. So we signed a personal services contract to John Bassett. The 3 of us, myself, Jim Kick, and Paul Warfield, at probably between 5 and 10 times what we were making in the NFL at the time. And also, we're going to get the benefit of Canada. Well, then Canada decided to vote down the World Football League because they wanted to protect the CFL. So John Bassett had to transplant the offense, and he transplant the team, and he had to do it very quickly. And he went down and moved it to Memphis, which was some pretty good fishing, but just wasn't what I had in mind for Canada. And it turned out Memphis was a great place, and very receptive, and it went well. But I got to meet Elvis Presley. Jim Kick and Elvis Presley had a lot in common. They like to shoot 8-ball and listen to music and play music and talk football. And I like to hang out with them and have a beer, watch them shoot pool. So it was a pretty unique situation that happened, and kind of fun at the same time. World Football League, of course, collapsed. When it did, we were in personal services contract, so the NFL had to buy out the contract from John Bassett, and that's what happened. I went to the Giants, and I think the other fellows came back. I think Warfield came back to Cleveland for a while. And I think Kick went to Washington. There were some, and then out to Denver, I think. So it was kind of at the end of our careers, all of our careers. But at the same time, what a great thing to jump and then never came to fruition in Toronto. I still fantasize about that. I know, I just feel that I got to know a lot of people in Toronto, and I've been much more prone to have a split citizenship thing and go back and forth because, with a country like Canada and countries like Canada and the United States, you couldn't be, we're mirrored image of each other. And as a result, it's a very relaxed border, and we can go back and forth and be a great place to do that. But it didn't happen.
Yeah, no Canada and fishing and the wildlife, but instead you're drinking beers with Elvis Presley in Memphis. That's a pretty good trade, though, right?
Well, hey, I'll never say anything bad about Memphis in the area. It was a lot of fun being there, and it was a real kick, a real hoot to get to meet Elvis, get to know him on a kind of a personal basis. Yeah. I just had a whole different impression. I'm not into music like Jim Kick, but Kick and Elvis had a lot in common. They like talking football. They like shooting pool. They both like music. They could discuss any one of those three things intimately and in depth. And then they'd come to me on some of the football things, or if it had to do with critters or anything, they would come to me, but seldom. But they really enjoyed each other's company, and that was a unique thing. I got a kick out of it because Elvis, when he's on stage, he's Elvis. But when he's shooting pool in his basement with Jim Kick, and they're arguing about a combination shot or whatever, or they're talking football, they're just people. And I got a real hoot out of the fact that, I grew up with one impression of Elvis when I was a kid. I was 10 years old when he was 1956 when he started singing Hound Dog and came to fruition of his career. And to see all that and see the career, but not know the man, and then to get to meet the man and realize he's a very down to earth and very, very intelligent, very athletically minded guy. He really liked football. I'd love to discuss it.
Yeah, he was a big football fan, and so certainly, as you said, discussed that a lot. For you, your career kind of came full circle. 1979, back with the Dolphins. You were the comeback player of the year that year in 1979. What was it like going back to Miami after the World Football League, a couple of years with the Giants as well?
It hadn't changed much. Shula was still as intense as ever, and very demanding. A lot of players had changed. Probably 1/3 to nearly half the team had changed. But I went back. I still had Kuchin, but there were still some offensive linemen there that had been there before. And we put together a pretty good season. We lost to Oakland, and I think Oakland, I don't know if Oakland went all the way that year or not. Seems to me they did. But,
So eventually you retire after that 1979 season with the Dolphins as well. As you said, I saw you say you didn't retire. You got retired by the NFL. It seems like that's kind of a recurring thing for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, people always say I retired. You retired that year. I said, no, I got fired that year. Shula, I went back with the idea of blocking for Delvin Williams. Delvin Williams had some problems and kind of dropped out in about the mid-season. And as a result, I became the primary ball carrier. And as old as I was, you start talking about 9-10 years in the league, carrying the ball 30-40 times a game. I don't know. I wasn't tough enough to do that. Anyway, I took a real beating that last year I played, carrying the ball that much. And as a result, I'd come back just to be a third and short kind of person and not be so leading the offense. So I told him, if you want me to come back again, if Delvin Williams isn't coming back and I'm going to be the primary ball carrier, I want a salary that's in accordance with what I used to get paid at the end of my career before I left the last time. I went to quite a bit more money, and they said no. And I said, well, good, then I'm out. And Shula then We talked back and forth a couple of times, but then he placed me on waivers. He let me go. And it was time. I didn't really want to go back. You get up in your high 30s or your early 30s, and you're still carrying the ball 40 times a game. You can't rebound from that. At that age, things slow down. Your ability to bounce back from that kind of punishment just changes from your 20s to your 30s drastically. And so I went on my way.
Yeah, your body took a toll, took a beating, 10 broken noses, right? You had that interesting little bar on your face mask there for your helmet. But for you, it seemed like a pretty easy transition. You did a lot of fishing and hunting shows. Where did that come from? Kind of the broadcast side of you. Were you doing any of that during your career?
When my career ended, my marriage ended as well soon after. And as I had decided to set out for Alaska, I was doing speaking engagements and appearances and doing some TV, sports TV, outdoor TV, fishing and hunting, appearing on other people's shows and things. But I wanted to go to Alaska and have my own show. And that's when I met and started to talk with Audrey. And we talked about it. I said, I'm not really interested in getting married and settled down. I want to go to Alaska. And if you want to go, here's the deal. And she listened intently and then looked at me and said, yes, that's what we'll do. So she started putting together the tactical approach on how to get our own show and broadcast from Alaska and film in Alaska and do the shows in Alaska and how to bounce around. And that changed drastically. We did it for like 15 or 16 years, but it changed drastically from the way we started out to the way we ended up, because by the time we ended up, we could broadcast back to our editors who were at my farm in Ohio and actually over the satellite live, because they opened up the communications. The military satellites opened up over Alaska and let everyone utilize their technology. So we could literally have a live phone hookup from our remote location in different places in Alaska to the edit bay in Ohio for their shows. And we did the North to Alaska show for, 10 years that way. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had to go to a lot of remote places and do a lot of fishing and bear viewing and whale watching and all kinds of things. And if we do another book, I think I'll do that about that experience, because that over the 17 or 18 years that we were up there and did that, my gosh, some of the places and some of the great folks, some of our first Americans up there in the very North Country, what great remote villages and what a great lifestyle they have. Just a unique situation and very different, but very humane, very enjoyable, I guess is the word.
Hey, you mentioned Audrey Bradshaw, who you work with there. You said your longtime partner and help you with your new memoir, Head On. Again, that we're talking about here, a lot of the stories from that book, out October 4th. Last week, we talked with Dwight Freeney, a future Pro Football Hall of Famer. You were inducted in 1987. What is that moment like when you're on the dais and you're talking, you've got the yellow jacket on, you see your bust for the first time? What's it like when you're inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio? So an Ohio guy as well, maybe it meant a little bit more to you.
Yeah, it did, because when they announced that the Hall of Fame was going to be built in Canton, Ohio, I was probably a freshman or sophomore in high school. And I decided to go down to the grand opening, and, they were having a big press event, and Pete Rozelle and a plethora of famous athletes, Bronco Nagurski included, were all going to be down there. And I'd read several books on Bronco Nagurski. And so I went down and tried to get in. And of course, you had to have a button, and they were a pass, and I didn't. And me and another guy, I think Ron Mahofer was his name, he grew up with me in Stowe. his father owned a Chevy dealership, so he had a car, and we got down there to experience the situation and see it. But we had to kind of sneak in, and we got in, and I got right up at the end of the stage, and I was looking up at the stage, and Bronco Nagurski was standing about 6 or 8 feet from me, and I was looking at him, thinking about the book I had read about him and everything, and he looked down and kind of smiled at me, and I smiled back at him, and then he kind of nodded, and I looked to where he was kind of pointing, telling me, or conveying to me. When I looked, the usher grabbed me, drug me out. So the first 2 times that I tried to get into the Hall of Fame, I was thrown out. And then the third time I didn't try to get in, and turns out I got in.
There you go. Again, in 1987. And once again, all this is in the book, Head On, a memoir. And I know you're on social media as well. I know you have your own website, but how can people follow you? How can they obviously get this book, pre-order, and then when it comes out on October 4th?
Well, I think as you alluded to, it's on there on my site. So just come on, and Audrey handles all that for me, and she'll make sure that they get their book. It's a fun story. We had a great time. I had a great time living it. There's a lot of humor in it because I got into some funny situations that I could only, we've talked about some of them, but just the confrontation with Shula, the different things that happened over the years. Sitting and watching Elvis Presley talk football, shooting 8 balls, kind of unique in his basement. Had a great looking bartender. It was, she was beautiful, which it was entertaining. But the only thing that we didn't extrapolate, we didn't expand on, was really the Alaska thing, and that probably deserving of its own book. If we do another book, I think that's what we'll do. Is one about that total experience, because so many people contact me about where to go and what they want to fish for and what they want, and there's so many different selections. There's so many. It's still so out back up there, and so diverse, and so many unique places to go and see, that I think I will probably do another book about it here in another year or so.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to that. Lastly, again, the first meeting with Don Shula, you told him you didn't like him, he didn't like you. How did that relationship end? Obviously, I'm sure it turned around just a bit.
In his final years, I got to be in his company several times, and we had just ongoing, from the time I walked in till the time I left, we were just back and forth battering, and it was a lot of fun. Now, that wasn't just he and I. That was with a lot of the other players from the 72 team and other alumni from different years that would get together and have a cookout or whatever Don wanted to do. And it was great times. He left us very quickly and very unexpectedly, much like Jim Kick. Just he was here and then gone. And I just wished I'd have had more time to talk to him. I went through the book and wrote the book. It occurred to me that I should have sat down and talked with him about some of these things more in depth, because I never really pushed him to get exactly what transpired. I took him at his word at the time, but I would have liked to, 30 years come back and approach the subject again. His intensity, I just, he had a great sense of humor, but in order to be as intense as he was, he had to cover it up a lot. And that made me wonder if he's as real as what he seemed to be. And then when I handed the scouting report and he tore it up, that's proof of the pudding. At least he's he is what he says in that respect. Yeah. So his intensity was just his little things. I used to just get upset because of his weight. He always had these weights that were down. Earl Morrill, for my gosh. Well, you had the kicker, Garo Premium. He's in the sauna with me. I'm sitting there looking at him. What the hell's a kicker doing in here trying to get in shape? The kicker's too fat. Well, that's crazy. But there it was. And then later it dawned on me, but I never had a chance to ask him. It dawned on me that maybe he put those weights down there so that we would spend more time with each other in the sauna and getting ready to weigh in and complaining about him. Maybe that was part of his plan to create great teamwork, because without great teamwork and respect for each other and wanting to win for each other, you can't go undefeated. It doesn't just happen. There's got to be more effort put in. And you think by being more tight friend-wise, closer to each other as friends, besides just teammates, made a difference. And I think that might be the winning edge that he was talking about. I never had a chance to say, did you do that for that reason? Or were you just that nuts about making weights ridiculous in order to force guys to work out that much? I think might be a little bit of both, but I don't know. And I never asked him, because I never thought about it until he was gone. And that's a terrible thing. That'd be my only advice to anyone that's reaching retirement age or so on, is spend more time with people that you're really close to, and ask them the things that you puzzle about sometimes, because all of a sudden they're gone, and it's the final curtains is pulled, and that's it. You never have a chance to go back, recollect.
Well, Larry, I'm glad we had a chance to recollect here and share some great stories. I love them all. Again, you're a Hall of Famer on a perfect team. And I love the fact, like you said, you're still involved with every season, because everyone's competing against the rest of the field, but they're competing against you guys, the best to ever do a perfect season back in 1972. Thanks so much for your time, and wish you nothing but the best. Again, with the book Head On, a memoir, comes out October 4th. Go wherever you get your books and make sure you get that, because we just touched on some of the stories. I know you said, there's more stories in there that we didn't get to, but certainly a great read about the great Larry Csonka and your career. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mike. See you later.
Well, once again, a great guest, Pro Football Hall of Famer Larry Csonka in episode number 43. Our thanks to Larry and for Audrey Bradshaw for helping set up that interview. Be sure to check out his book, Head On, a memoir, as he's got more great stories in there and expands on some of the stuff that we touched on here today. Our thanks, as always, to you for listening, for watching. Be sure to subscribe, as we'll have more great guests coming up in the future. Thanks for joining us here once again in the front row with Mike Vaccaro. Have a great day, everybody.